The newly elected governor of Enugu State, Peter Mbah, this past Monday kicked off his administration by signing 3 executive orders, which he said would facilitate his desire to connect with the people's expectations of a people-oriented government. According to the governor, the Executive Order 001 of 2023 is an order of the Citizen Charter in line with the promise he made to the people of Enugu State. This order, he said, demanded the highest form of transparency from him in the management of public funds and the right of the people to hold him accountable. Professor Onyia is secretary to the Enugu State government, and he joins us now to look at these charters as signed by the governor, their expected impact, and why the preference for executive orders instead of proper laws. Many thanks, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Now, I'm wondering, what is the significance, of the 3 executive orders signed by the governor? Can you tell us more, about these orders?
Thank you so much. There were 3 executive orders signed once His Excellency Governor of Enugu State was sworn into power. The first one was the Citizens Charter, which was a social contract that will guide, excuse me, His Excellency's engagement with his citizens. And what this does, just going back to some of the comments you made earlier, instead of waiting to go through law, is to facilitate a process that sets the culture for accountability in Enugu State. The Citizens Charter is a performance-based social contract. The whole idea is to push transparency and accountability. This sits around the 3 philosophies, the governance philosophies that guide what His Excellency Governor Peter Mbah is going to push for, which is traceability, transparency, and accountability. This is critical, and this culture is cascaded within the ministry public service establishments as we have today. Now, the important thing here is that it allows the Enugu State's government to be able to go into a charter, a contract with its citizens, where there are certain expectations around how the whole fiscal responsibility, the PFM, and our economic development process is communicated to the people, their rights to demand for certain information. We're also going to be pushing for a quarterly open report to citizens. This means that for the first time, they should be published. The projection is for them to be published by September, the 1st of September of 2023. Also a quarterly report that is mandatory across all levels of government. And this is going to come from the commissioners once they come in, and His Excellency himself is going to have a direct report into this process. Then we're going to have to also publish a monthly state account as well as an annual audited account. And this usually we're going to be pushing for a particular timeline within the month. This is important because we want to ensure that the citizens of Enugu begin to understand that by our action, that the Excellency wants to create that level of trust. And if once there's no transparency, the whole mindset of the baggage of people's thinking around the political process of governance delivery will also be an issue that can hinder the buy-in into that process. So he felt on his first day at work that he needs to move straight, sign this in, and it's been guiding the process. We have started socializing this within the public sector. Yesterday, I had my first meeting with the permanent secretaries, and they are now supposed to cascade it down to ensure that the social contract is internalized, that it's not a document that sits in the Lion building and kept as something that the governor has signed in, rather than something that we collectively own, and ensure that the people of Enugu State begin to see the credibility of those that are in governance now. So His Excellency also signed the second one, which is now authorizes the removal of every unlawful barrier within the state. Streets here predominantly due to security concerns or whatever the neighborhoods feel the need to do this, raise barriers that they lock, and because of this create a level of security challenges when security agencies or health agencies want to assess certain areas, the doors are locked and the gates are locked and people walk away. We feel it's unlawful, so within the first 100 days, those are going to be removed. And if they're not, there's also a backup plan to ensure that we remove it at the state level, and the people that had done this will be accountable for the commercial implication of that. But finally, the third one is something that is critical. His Excellency felt that there's no way we are going to move our GDP from 3.3 to $30 billion if we do not have the right business environment that encourages private sector participation. We also know one thing that we have worked on in the past couple of months was to do, right after his election, was to do an analysis of where the gaps are in terms of the ease of doing business. And His Excellency has gone ahead to set up parameters that can help ensure that businesses feel in need to engage in activities within Enugu State. And if you do recall his inaugural speech, one thing that he left with all the citizens of Enugu, in addition to the other important things he said, was that from now onwards, it's going to be business unusual. So we didn't want to hit the ground beginning to think and wait for a process. What we did was to be able to lead from the front. So His Excellency set the pattern now for us to engage private finance, for us to set out clear pipelines of bankable projects that will attract potential private sector actors. We also want to work with DFIs to ensure that these things are put in place in terms of de-risking pipeline projects. But all these things can work if the government institutions that underpin this process are being handled at the best level of transparency governance, and also to ensure that in doing this, that investors feel like they can come to a particular point to do what they need to do and hold specific individuals responsible. So we had outlined everything that will happen here, timelines for which grievance has to be shared, our response to it, all in creating the environment that will begin the conversation of how do we move Enugu State from 3.3 billion to 30 billion GDP. Thank you so much.
Now, Professor Onyia, thank you so much for that very detailed explanation. But I'd like us to focus just a little bit on Executive Order 002 of 2023. You talked about, removing all barriers, that had been set up within the next 100 days. But we understand that some of those barriers were set up for security reasons. So will the government, probably be putting in other measures, to protect the lives of citizens and their property?
Yes, so very important question. Thank you so much. So the context, I'm mindful of time, so I hadn't set out the context. You're very correct. There's a context to why this whole locking gates and building barriers started, and that was the people's sense of insecurity. His Excellency and the team, the security team, are also working right now as we speak to begin to escalate the security intervention measures being put in place. So it won't be a situation where people are taking down barriers and not feeling to a large extent that the government is committed to their safety. So what this government is going to do is to show by its action that security management processes can be done organically. His Excellency has worked with very critical stakeholders to identify measures that can help provide security while we are addressing with these safety issues going forward. So it's all part of the package. What you've seen now here is what triggers that, and the 100 days is not just sitting on taking out the barrier, it's also working simultaneously to manage issues of security where people feel comfortable that in taking out these gates, they know that government is looking into assuring their safety. And do keep in mind that we believe in collective security management, that security in itself and the information that comes around intelligence is a collective effort. So what His Excellency is doing is leading a game from the front by making sure that he puts the right mechanisms in motion, while the citizens themselves, because their safety is also part of their responsibility, will key into this process, and collectively we're going to begin to move to where Enugu State returns to where it was in the past, where security and safety is utmost in the minds of governance.
Professor Onyia, now in the governor's inaugural speech, he promised that Enugu will rubbish the Japa syndrome. I'm wondering if you can give us, an idea of how he plans to do this, especially now that Nigerians are grappling with the reality of all subsidy removal.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, the Japa syndrome is simply something that has been elicited by the poor economic situation in the country, the reduction in people's quality of life. People do not get up and want to leave their home base to go live somewhere else, except they're going for vacation. So a few people that do that do it for reasons, but when the collective is looking at that as an escapist approach, it means that there's an issue fundamentally with the way quality of life is addressed with the policies of government and how people are held accountable for the public goods. So the Commonwealth in itself should be deployed in creating an enabling environment that escalates the opportunities for people, catalyzes investment where private actors can come in and begin to present an enabling environment for our youth. And in Enugu State, we have an energetic, creative, striving youth population. So the key is, what do we put in place as he asks, to ensure that people feel a level of comfort to be able to harness the potentials that we know we have in Enugu State. So we're going to be working very diligently in expanding our agro-processing clusters. His Excellency set out in his manifesto 3 huge agro-processing communities or clusters that will cut across every of the value chains. We're also going to work closely in providing infrastructure. We're going to also work within our enablers to be able to set up those creative economic growth framework that can encourage investors to come in and support the young people. So we're not going to stop this syndrome by legislation. We're going to create an environment that will allow the young people to be able to harness their potentials, because they're going out to go suffer. Some of them are going to go out there to be security agents, do all sorts of things that they normally would not do here. Highly educated, we know that once we get out there in class, wherever we go in diaspora, our young people are exceptional in the academic abilities in the work environment. So why don't we circle back and set up a framework that is going to allow that? Part of what we've done in the transition committee leading up to this is that we have a transition committee that is led by people in the private sector, people in the development space that have worked years into finding out how do we put in the right pillars to manage the issues that people have within the private sector. How do we de-risk them? How do we create opportunities? So we've had people come into work to begin to set the policies that we need, the legislations that we need, and what we will need in terms of engagement with the private sector to create this. So Enugu State is going to work in ways intentionally to catalyze investment and create the right opportunity. Once those things are there and the economy starts to grow, young people are going to want to key in. We have tech villages here that are not optimized. So we're going to optimize that by having tech companies out of different parts of the country come here and make Enugu State their home, and in some instances use those facilities to be able to crowd in private capital into the state to be able to now expand our employment opportunities. So that's the thinking that His Excellency has when he said that. And do keep in mind, this is going to be a continuous process. He's really committed to this. His team is committed to this. So we're tracking all the indicators. Right now, we're working with the data that is available to create a baseline, and in doing that, set out in motion some key milestones that we need to hit within a period of time, and also use the data we have to measure growth within this, the young people that are doing exceptional things, those that have been attracted back from the diaspora to contribute. So a couple of things that we'll be doing, including diaspora fund that we are pushing forward. So it's going to be a collective process, but the key thing is that we have addressed our intervention in thematic areas, and we have enablers that will trigger that, and there's going to be a level of measurability. So at the end of the day, we can say that this is where we started, using a growth model, this is where we are. But the key thing is that everybody is not going to have the mindset that after graduation, they need to escape from the country to feel relevant, to survive. So Dr. Peter Mba is going to be very intentional about making sure that those that are outside will feel a need to begin to come back, because Enugu State will be the place to be. Thank you.
You spoke about some milestones, and I'm wondering if you can, give us an idea of what milestones we can expect the governor to hit, maybe by his first 100 days in office.
So we set out a few timelines. One of them in the executive order was the 100 days. I've talked about it. But we also, His Excellency also promised Enugu that in 180 days, they're going to have water. So the thing is that even as at this morning, when he was coming to work, somebody said to him, you have 176 days left. So people are counting the days and holding him accountable, holding those of us that are part of his team accountable. And for instance, within the water space, if Enugu State is sitting on the second largest water bed, why shouldn't there be water, sufficient water supply to Enugu? And eventually, Enugu State begins to build a blue economy where water actually becomes a business. So we know that there's so many things that can catalyze investment. We're also working towards ensuring that the agro-processing clusters I've shared with you is something that is not some abstract concept sitting. By engaging with DFIs, we've started our first level engagement with the African Development Bank. We're also doing the same with Afro-Exim. We know that these organizations can provide us with the technical assistance that we need to set up the infrastructure, the design of the concept note, the outline business case. So these are the things that create the foundation for us to begin to work. So we have timelines, but we do have activities that we are going to be held accountable to in addition, in a way that these DFIs feel like we're prepared enough and that we have de-risked investment enough for them to come in and support the growth. And right now, I can assure you that all our minds within government here is set on ensuring that Enugu State feels like that comfortable place to go to be the top 3 investment states in the country, and hopefully escalate that to a regional space. So that's our thinking, and we've set all those things out in a dashboard that will track performance, set out a risk metric that helps us now de-escalate the process depending on where the risk is sitting. Be it political economy, be it technical, just be it operational. We have set out these things because we are not taking anything for granted. His Excellency is very intentional about the delivery model, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next 4 years.
Well, thanks so much for laying out the ambition, and we do wish you all the best in trying to achieve that. Now, before I let you go, I want to know if, while talking about trying to boost transparency and efficiency in government, will this administration also be looking at cutting the cost of governance? So, His Excellency is big on a lean administration. From his record, he's run a lean organization all his life. We come from the development space. Most of us have been there in the past 25 years, and we're very keen of making sure that there's value for money for every human resource that is deployed. We're still doing an audit. We will embark on an audit of what we have, the human resource we have, and for us, what we feel that will be helpful is now to be able to push for an opportunistic approach where those that are not in the right place where they can grow and render the necessary value will be put in places where they will do that, enhance their capacity, and the whole idea is to create a public service process that is very focused on increasing the quality of life of Enugu. So that's going to be our focus, and the key thing around this is that if you're not able to hold to the process, I guess the best possible thing will be that you step out. So we are looking at that very carefully, but we're going to take an opportunistic approach first before we'll go into any model that might be perceived as punitive. So His Excellency is very, very focused on managing the recurrent and the cost of governance, even in his own behavior, the way he manages his office, the way we, his lieutenants, manage our office. So you're going to begin to see a difference in the way Enugu State is run. Indeed, Secretary to Enugu State Government, Professor Onyia, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. We wish you all the best.